Hey there, it's Kat and this is Brews and Reviews. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the Shadowfold from the Netflix original series Shadow and Bone. This series is based on the Grishaverse books by Leigh Bardugo. And if you're watching this video, then I'm assuming that you've already finished the series and you're just after some more information. This video should hopefully provide you guys with a little context behind what you've seen, though it won't contain any spoilers for anything that hasn't been adapted yet, so any sequel books, there's going to be no spoilers for that. So let's get into it. What is the Shadowfold? Without even watching the show, if you've seen any posters for Shadow and Bone or if you watched the trailer, then you've probably seen the Shadowfold. Also known as the Fold or the Unsea, the Shadowfold is a giant wall of darkness and shadow that has essentially sliced the country of Ravka in two. In the book, Alina describes the Fold as a swath of nearly impenetrable darkness that grew with every passing year and crawled with horrors. It's normally drawn on maps as a long, narrow lake, a stain, or a shapeless cloud that severs Ravka from its only coastline, leaving it landlocked. Alina describes entering the Fold as being like drifting into a thick cloud of smoke, but there was no heat, no smell of fire. Sound seemed to dampen and the world became still. Very quickly, the visibility decreases to the point where Alina can't even see her own hands, and the darkness is described as black, weightless, and absolute. This has obviously been adapted slightly for the show, as it would be very difficult to show any action taking place in total darkness, but the concept of the Fold is the same. How was the Fold made? In the Netflix series, the creation of the Fold is explained in episode 4 and further explored in episode 7. However, this does differ slightly to the creation of the Fold in the book. In episode 4, Otskazatsia, Alina explains how she and most of Ravka believe the Fold came to be. Hundreds of years before the events of the show, the Black Heretic, a Grisha with the ability to manipulate shadows, attempted to create an army by using a forbidden science called Murzost. Now, Murzost is different to the small science, which is what Grisha practice, as it is unnatural and essentially magic. In the book, we learn about the Black Heretic from the Darkling, a character known in the show as General Kirigan. He tells Alina that the Black Heretic was his great-great-great-grandfather, and describes the Shadowfold as a mistake, an experiment born of his greed, maybe his evil. We don't see this moment in the books, however the show explores the creation of the Fold and the Volcra in episode 7, The Unsea, and it also reveals to us the cost of using Murzost. In the book, however, we don't actually know if the Black Heretic was trying to create an army, just that he was experimenting with Murzost. The creation of the Volcra was purely accidental, and something he did not expect. What are the Volcra? A Volcra is a grey-winged creature that lives inside the Shadowfold, and is largely the reason that crossing the Shadowfold is so dangerous. In the book, our first introduction to the Volcra comes from an illustration that Alina and Mal see as children. They're described as having long, filthy claws, leathery wings, and rows of razor-sharp teeth for feasting on human flesh. Tasty! They are notably blind from having spent so long evolving in the darkness of the Fold. However, their senses of smell and hearing are excellent. They also travel in flocks of up to 100 strong, so they're a massive threat to anyone trying to cross the Fold. I don't know about you, but 100 birds coming at me would be terrifying enough, let alone Volcra. As mentioned before, the series shows us the creation of the Volcra in episode 7, where the Black Heretic attempts to use Murzost to create an army. Instead, the power used on the men near the Heretic turned them into Volcra. Now in the book this is a little different. The Volcra were actually the men, women and children who lived in the area that the Fold spread out to cover. The Heretic's use of Murzost actually corrupted them and turned them into the dangerous creatures that Alina and the others encounter. Why is the Fold a problem? Aside from being a giant wall of shadow filled with horrifying monsters, the location of the Fold is the primary problem for the people of Ravka. The world around Ravka is changing rapidly, and other countries are developing in ways they can't compete with, most notably in terms of weapons manufacturing. Ravkans need access to their ports for trade, and the Fold, described as a black slash that severed Ravka from its only coastline, is in the way. Every crossing of the Fold comes with a high mortality rate, which means that just getting basic resources takes a huge toll on the population of Ravka. Ravka is also at war with the Fjords in the north and the Shu in the south, so they're vulnerable, especially as the weapons that they can import or make are substandard at best. In the book, the Darkling states that a divided Ravka will not survive the New Age, so this implies that the Shadowfold will eventually lead to Ravka's destruction. Another notable problem relating to the Shadowfold is that it can't be ignored. It actually gets bigger every year and swallows more of the land as it goes. Unless it's destroyed, it will eventually cover all of Ravka, and all of its people will be killed by Volcra and the other beasts that live inside the Fold. How do people cross the Fold? Crossing the fold is incredibly dangerous, and it's made even more so by the limited transportation options. In normal circumstances, i.e. when you don't have a sun summoner at your side, you can't walk or run across it, you can't ride across on an animal, and you can't dig underneath it. Why? Noise and smell. Doing anything slightly noisy inside the fold is like signing your own death sentence. Noise would attract the Volcra and any other creature that had been perverted by the fold, and you'd more than likely end up dead. There isn't much you can do about a Volcra smelling your blood, but the less you move and the less you sweat, the less chance that a Volcra will be able to smell you. So running's not really an option. You also wouldn't be able to effectively mask an animal's scent or keep them calm and quiet, so that rules them out. And I don't want to hear anyone bringing up Milo here. Goat in the fold was a bad plan for avoiding the Volcra picking up their scent. So the people of Ravka came up with an alternative, but imperfect method of crossing the fold. Sand skiffs. In the book, sand skiffs are essentially described as shallow sleds, with a single rigged mast, an enormous sail and a railing that runs around its perimeter. The skiff we see in the show is a little bit more like the deck of a ship, but the lack of places to hide is a commonality between the two designs. As using anything that makes noise is out of the question, Grisha power is used to propel the sand skiffs across the fold. Squallers fill the sail with air, which thrusts the vehicle forward over the sand and allows for a silent crossing. In the series, we only see one skiff try to cross the fold. However, the book has multiple skiffs that all try to cross the fold at the same time. These skiffs are stocked with supplies, such as grain, timber, and raw cotton, and will be exchanged for the goods that West Ravka can acquire through their ports, most notably weapons and food. Also, if we take a slightly morbid look at this, the more skiffs you send through the fold, the more likely it is that some of them will make it through. For example, if the Volcra are distracted by the screams of your dying friends elsewhere, the probability of you getting through unscathed increases. You'd be traumatized, but alive! Now I hear you saying, why aren't Ravkans at least putting a roof on their skiffs? Well, the show introduces a new method of crossing the fold, and I think this explains exactly why this would be a waste of resources. The conductor's train is a slightly implausible method of transport through the fold, and as we can see from the show, it's not a foolproof one. Also, what kind of idiot went inside the fold and tried to lay train tracks down? I mean, it's like, oh, just let this be, it's like, the Volcra! You're dead. You're dead. I'm sorry, you're dead. You did not make it out alive. There's just no way that anyone laying down that track lived. It's very implausible. Anyway, Volcra hearing the train are likely to attack, and their claws can pierce through steel. So if they get those long claws and massive teeth into the train, then, that roof is not going to save anyone. Ravka suffers from having dwindling resources anyway, so putting more of those limited resources into building a barrier that wouldn't work anyway is pointless and wasteful. The only real hope that Ravkans have is that someday someone will figure out a way to destroy the fold. And that is why there is so much excitement and disbelief when Alina's powers are finally revealed. It's like the answer to their prayers. So I hope that explained a little bit more about the Shadow Fold, as seen in Netflix's adaptation of Shadow and Bone. If you have any questions, or if there are any other Shadow and Bone related topics that you'd like explained, then please let me know. If you like this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!